This is a special broadcast from Broadway Media and Rocky Mountain Power.
It was only after he had walked up to the Capitol building and was standing on the steps looking down the hill and out across Salt Lake City that it came to him. From here, on a clear day, you could see across half of Utah. Only today, it was not clear. There never was that clear a day in Salt Lake City anymore. Once, the desert of Utah had been as beautiful as the deserts of Palestine in the Old Testament. But now, it looked no better than the outskirts of Los Angeles. Shacky ranch houses stretched as far as the smog would allow the eye to see, and off to the west were the smelters of Anaconda copper pouring up into the pollution of the sky. That was Norman Mailer's impression of Salt Lake City from his 1979 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Executioner's Song. What are our thoughts on Utah's skies nearly 40 years since Norman Mailer wrote his book?
How does the air in the Wasatch Front affect you?
It's terrible. Oxygen, nevertheless, whether it's inversion in the winter or summer fires, it's bad news.
It's disgusting, and I can feel the shortness of breath just out the gate. Makes it harder to justify going outside and enjoying Utah's natural beauty, especially in the city environment.
I have a lot of breathing problems.
It definitely makes it hard to breathe. I really wish we would put more of an emphasis on clean air and air quality rather than the porn that we've kind of deemed a health crisis in this state.
I have a hard time breathing. I get a lot of mucus and stuff that builds up, you know. You can't exercise outside. I have to exercise in my basement on my treadmill.
Well, you know, the air quality's pretty poor, you know, and I have some little brothers and sisters, you know, they got like asthma and stuff, and sometimes it's like hard for them to breathe in the morning, and they need to like use a respirator and stuff, and I don't know, like the air's pretty gray around here, and that kind of sucks, you know. Wish I could see like blue skies, you know.
I don't really feel much of an issue. Sometimes I do, when obviously we have the lake effect that comes through, and I do feel like it does affect my breathing at sometimes, and it also affects, matter of fact, my wife has lung problems now, so, it can certainly affect, and I understand that the pollution can certainly cause an issue in our breathing, you bet.
It's not very appealing, that's for sure. You can definitely tell it's not very good.
Well, it affects me every day. I'm breathing in poor air all the time.
Well, there are some people on the streets of Salt Lake City talking about the air that we breathe. And that's the name of this broadcast presented today by Broadway Media Incorporated. I'm Bill Allred, the moderator for the panel today as we talk about air pollution in the Salt Lake Valley. We talk a lot about air pollution in the Salt Lake Valley anymore. I want to welcome everyone who's listening to this broadcast on all of the Broadway media stations. I wonder if I can list them by memory. Let's see, X96, The Eagle, The Mix, Rewind, U92, and then both of our AM stations, ESPN 960 and 700. Did I get all of them? I think I did. Welcome to all of you and people watching this course being on streaming live. I want to introduce our panel. To my immediate right, Dr. Carrie Kelly. She's a chemical and environmental engineer and assistant professor at the University of Utah. Her work focuses on the links between energy, air quality, and human health, and is motivated by local and regional air quality challenges along the Wasatch Front, of which there are many. She performed early work that led to an improved understanding and policy solutions to address the sources of particulate matter during winter inversions along the Wasatch Front. She's been, you were on the Utah Air Quality Board for a number of years and is chair of the Utah Air Quality Policy Board. Thanks for being with us. Then next to her we have Tom Carter. Tom is the executive director for the Utah Clean Air Partnership, UCARE, which is a nonprofit organization to help bring communities together with that one goal in mind. That's improving Utah's air. Tom has a very diverse background, including work in political and policy arena He's had international experience in professional sports. He was in Australia doing Major League Baseball work in Australia. It's a story. Talk to Tom about that later. And he's also served as an elected official in New Jersey. He's worked on policy initiatives in New Jersey and Utah. And he's now back here living in Utah and soon to be married.
Exciting stuff.
Next we have Sarah Wright. She is the founder and executive director of clean energy advocacy group Utah Clean Energy. Sarah has a proven record of success in driving renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions within the state of Utah. She gives, you provide expert testimony to various panels and to the state legislature as well, I would assume.
That is part of what I do.
Thank you, Sarah Wright. Glad to have you here. Bryce Bird, who we've had on our show at X96 before. He's the Air Quality Director with the Utah Department of Environmental Quality, where he works with his staff to provide regulatory programs that are tied to measure air quality improvements. He's been doing that for a number of years and still is able to smile.
I love my job, yes.
And then finally we have James Campbell. Mr. Campbell is the Legislative Policy Advisor at Rocky Mountain Power. James joined Rocky Mountain Power in 2007. He's worked on developing corporate policy and strategy. He recently drafted and implemented the Sustainable Transportation and Energy Plan legislation and was the recipient, well, not, I don't think personally was the recipient, of a $4 million U.S. Department of Energy cost share award for the deployment of electronic transportation programs. He's working on Rocky Mountain Power's Smart Energies initiative. He's a Utah guy. Got all of his schooling at the University of Utah, right? Yes, and Bryce, yes.
And a former Division of Air Quality employee as well.
Ah.
That's right. I was trained quite well by Bryce and his team.
And we want to thank James and Rocky Mountain Power. Of course, they're underwriting this broadcast so that we can bring it to you commercial free. All right, let's get right into it. Bryce Bird, are you ready?
I am.
How bad is Utah's air, and what are the major causes of it being so crappy?
Really, our air quality is a two-part story. When we have good air quality, it's actually very good. That on an annual average, we are very low compared to other metropolitan areas of our size. But when we have the temperature inversions during the winter, it builds up quickly. We get to some of the highest levels measured in the United States during those few days each year.
Hold the microphone really close to your mouth.
And during the summertime, we have a particular problem with ground level ozone. And so that also builds up during the stagnant conditions during the summertime. That's an urban pollutant. We have some unique air pollution issues with winter ozone in the Uinta Basin as well. That is something that usually is not formed. Ozone is a product of usually urban emissions and then heat and sunlight, but in the Uinta Basin it happens when it's below freezing.
And then the Cache Valley as well as, I'm sorry, did you mention Cache Valley?
No, Cache would be part of our urban valleys that are subject to those cold pool temperature inversions.
Now, when we have this pollution, when we think of it, when we have an inversion in the winter and we see the air being really, you can see it. You can almost taste it. But when that goes away, pollution levels that are not seen are still pretty bad, aren't they?
Again, during the summertime, the ozone you can't see. It's just a form of oxygen that's a reactive chemical that impacts our lungs. You can't see that as well. But when the air clears out, it is very clean. Often when the inversion starts to build, what you first see is actually water vapor that's trapped in that area as well. So we rely on
it's water vapor that forms because there are particulates for it to form around, correct?
Correct. And again, that trapping when you have the cold, stagnant conditions. We rely on our air quality monitors to know exactly what the concentrations are. It used to be you could really correlate well with what you could see with what was on the filters. Now, often we see it before we actually measure it being.
Where does this pollution mostly come from? As I understand it, there are three major sources. You can group them, right?
Correct. We categorize all the emissions as either being a point source emission. That's a smokestack industry would be the initial source of that emissions. We have area sources, which is homes, businesses, consumer activities, even things all the way down to hairspray, nail polish. All those contribute as the area source category. Then the mobile source category is actually the largest component. And so we drive 1 million cars, about 30 million miles a day in Salt Lake County alone, and those all add up. So each car doesn't add that much, but when you get 30 million miles driven by a million cars. That's the challenge that we have.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to turn to some other panel members. The EPA has deemed Salt Lake, Provo, Cache as pollution non-attainment areas. For at least, I don't know when they first started doing that, but it's been a long time. They say, Utah, you are a non-attainment area. It means you're out of compliance. You've got to fix the pollution in the state. And that happens year after year after year after year, and we're still out of compliance. Are there any penalties for this?
So actually, the real story is that the standards have become more protective over time. And so with the Clean Air Act that came out in the early 1970s, Congress charged EPA with determining what was protective of public health with an adequate margin of safety. And so every 5 years, the EPA reviews those standards. So we actually have a really good track record of being declared non-attainment, developing a plan, coming back into attainment, but then the yardstick changes and we start again.
It's a losing game then, isn't it?
But overall, the air quality is improving. So we have historical monitoring going all the way back to the 50s, and we're seeing a continual improvement in air quality despite our growth in both economic development and population.
Bryce is always is able to put a nice face on that and say air quality is improving. Sarah, what do you think about that?
Well, we can see that it is improving, but it's still not good enough. And what Utah Clean Energy works to do is imagine a different future and try to move the new technologies that are cleaner and that will help prevent air pollution and have, as you know, it's predicted that population will double. And if we keep doing things the same way we always have, we're going to be in a load of trouble with respect to air quality.
Well, so air is improving. Why is it, and I'll let anybody field this, why is it that people have the perception that it's not improving, that it is in fact getting worse? Why is that perception out there?
I think
James says, this is James Campbell with Rocky Mountain Power.
I think one of the things that's different from the historical pollution is really it's the type of pollution is different now. Historically, we had homes burn a lot of coal, you had a lot of stacks, a lot of businesses, and it would go high into the air and then it would fall straight down. Now we're talking about ground level pollution, so it's different. It's a different type of pollution, and so it actually affects people differently. And so where there's a lot of at risk, especially where the roads are, where the freeways, we have schools, it's a different type of pollution than we did historically, even though maybe the monitors show it's improved, but now it's a different type of pollution that can affect people differently.
Is it worse or better for your health?
Well, the other point I want to make is there's also more population here to be exposed. And so we do see, we can do studies about hospital admissions during our high pollution episodes. Those are increasing. We have more susceptible people. We have, again, more of the impacts because there's more population to be exposed to, even though the levels are lower. So the health concern is there, even more so now than it has been in the past.
We know that there is all this pollution out there, and I want to come back, and we're going to take a break here in a second. I want to come back, and I'm particularly interested in the fact that homes, buildings like we're in right now, those are causing a lot of pollution. That's really fascinating to me, and then I want to talk about really how much, what can be done about that. We'll also we'll discuss other causes of pollution in a little more depth before we take a break. But we're going to take a break right now. We'll be back after this.
Do you make any personal effort to help make the air cleaner?
No. Maybe walking places instead of driving.
I take the front runner occasionally to work in order to prevent that, just as one less car on the road.
Currently, I do not. To be honest with you, no, I don't. Just like any other American, I have a car that is completely, pollutes emission in sorts. So yes.
Ride my bike, drive a fuel-efficient vehicle.
I take tracks 5 days a week, and that's how I try to help.
Yeah, I use public transportation and I carpool. I just I try to kind of keep out of a car by myself, so I don't pollute.
I absolutely do not, but I do not drive a motor vehicle, so I don't take away from anything.
Are there any activities you avoid doing when the air is bad?
Yeah, riding my bike or even going outside in general because hurts your lungs, and it's like chewing on gross oxygen.
Coming into the city. I live in West Valley City, so coming downtown seems really superfluous if I'm not going to be going outside at all.
I don't like to really take my kids out when the air is bad, and I have 5 kids, so.
Wow, you look great for having 5 kids.
Well, walking, you know, obviously going outside, and I living in Salt Lake, when you can see the air is quite poor, you know, just going outside in general, and I know it affects children and things like that. So I think it can be, it makes you not want to go outside.
Just trying to stay inside, not breathing that air. Maybe going up the canyon to breathe some fresh air.
Hi everyone, Cindy Crane, President and CEO of Rocky Mountain Power and a proud Utahn that is breathing the same air as you. You know, I'm very excited that we are underwriting this program because we are committed to helping our communities build a cleaner future and a sustainable future at that. I truly believe that it starts with electric vehicles and all of us electrifying our homes and businesses. At Rocky Mountain Power, we are investing in the infrastructure that is needed, and we're providing $10 million in incentives to really make this dream a reality. Learn more about our community partnerships at liveelectric.org.
All right, we're back with the air we breathe, or try to breathe sometimes here, and we're having a panel discussion with with James Campbell, Rocky Mountain Power. I always want to say Utah Power and Light. I still write my bill to Utah Power and Light, and you guys take the money. So,
Well, I bank at the Utah Power and Light Credit Union.
oh, there you go. We have Bryce Bird, Department of Air Quality with the state of Utah. Sarah Wright. And your organization is called? Utah Clean Energy. And Tom Carter, he is with UCARE. And we also have with us Dr. Kelly.
Carrie Kelly.
Carrie Kelly. Carrie Kelly, a researcher, University of Utah, and has studied these issues a lot. Sarah, I was looking at your website, and you talk a lot on your website about pollution caused by buildings, homes, office buildings, that sort of thing. I think people are not aware of that. What, my home is a polluter? How does that happen and how does it work?
You're right, Bill. We really don't think that the natural gas that we burn in our homes and buildings, because it is clean burning, but that it contributes to pollution. Right now, area sources, which include our homes and buildings, are about 40% of the emissions and expected to grow as our vehicles get cleaner. So it's really important that we build our homes more efficiently, that we turn down our thermostats so that we're not wasting fuel, because when we're burning fuel that we don't need, we're needlessly creating pollution. And that we start to reimagine and rethink. We have one builder in Utah that's building all homes that are net zero and ready to be zero emissions homes going forward. So we have the technology, it's just a matter of harnessing that and then taking individual steps along the way.
Say the name of that builder.
That is Garbett Homes.
All right. I just think that's important for people to know that they make an effort to do that and build homes that are net zero. That's excellent.
You know,
yes,
Bill,
James.
along those lines, there's a development that we've been working with called the Give Group, and they've actually built a multifamily apartment complex right over by West High School that is all electric, so there's no combustion that occurs inside the building at all, so they won't contribute at all to any of the pollution. And they signed up for our subscriber solar program, so they're getting 100% renewable to feed that building. Plus, they also have electric vehicle charging stations in their garage, so their residents can drive electric vehicles. So they can literally, you can live there and have a zero emission footprint in.
Let's talk a little bit about electric vehicles, just as long as you brought that up. And I know, Sarah, you also advocate for that a lot. UTA has some electric buses now, I know, 1 or 2. They're very expensive, I think. Most of their buses have converted to natural gas. That's a good thing. So are electric vehicles really a good way to go?
Electric vehicles are an excellent way to go. Right now, they're only about 0.5% of our vehicles. And we really need to get through that innovation curve and have them be a much larger percentage. Unfortunately, right now, there are some fees proposed for electric vehicles to have them pay for the roads. We agree that all vehicles should pay for the roads, but you also have to balance when you start those fees, because...
So what you're saying essentially is the Utah State Legislature is kind of hindering the move to electric vehicles by putting an extra fee on them.
I believe that they are at this time. I think that we should maybe put one on the books that will start into the future, but we want to keep electric vehicles growing as a bigger and bigger part of our transportation base.
Let me ask one thing about electric vehicles too, and James, this will go directly to you. There are people who say, well, yeah, electric vehicles don't pollute, but they are powered by electricity, which is provided by Rocky Mountain Power. You know where I'm going with this. And Rocky Mountain Power has coal-fired generation plants. So how does that offset, or does it? Or
Yeah, well, first from a local air quality perspective, we don't have any coal-fired in the valleys here. So if you do drive an electric vehicle, there would be no emissions associated with that in the valley where we actually live. Now, if you want to take a broader view, maybe a regional or even a global view from like a greenhouse gas emissions, actually, even with coal-fired power plants, electric vehicles are more efficient because you got scale. They're less emissions than an internal combustion engine. And you can actually go to the Union of Concerned Scientists, who've developed a calculator where you can actually type in your zip code and it'll calculate how many greenhouse gas emissions your electric vehicle would produce. And if you put it in here, it is quite a bit less than a traditional internal combustion engine. And one of the things also with Rocky Mountain Power is we have, over time, have brought more and more cleaner generation sources.
Wind generation.
Yeah, and so coal is no longer the majority generation source in our portfolio. We have a broad mix.
Is the long-range plan with Rocky Mountain Power and other people who use coal to generate power, the long-range plan has to be at some point to just not do it anymore?
Oh yeah. Our plan is to decarbonize our generation fleet, and that's a kind of a long-term plan that we're
very long,
but we're doing it. If you actually, from when I joined Rocky Mountain Power, the company was about 90% coal, and today it's under 50%.
It's under 50 now.
Yeah.
Let's turn to Dr. Kelly.
You got it.
Dr. Kelly. People with two first names always, it baffles me. Dr. Kelly, so we've talked about these various kinds of pollution, particulate pollution, ozone pollution. How do they affect people?
Yeah, so particulate matter is a big driver of adverse health effects. So if it's been linked to strokes and heart attacks and premature death, and in fact, some of the very early work on this was done down with the Utah Steel, Geneva Steel down in Utah Valley. Mm-hmm. And so and in the summer, with ozone, that's a big driver of asthma, and you can cause asthma, it can exacerbate asthma. In addition, it can make you more susceptible to infection. So all of these are very important for our health. And Bryce talked about ambient air quality standards, and these standards are developed to protect our health.
And I know there are also some preliminary studies, and people are looking at other causes, health risks from air pollution, links to autism, perhaps, links certainly to perhaps premature births, and also there's even, I think, people have been doing some preliminary studies on air pollution and suicide?
Yeah, so there's a recent study published in Utah on the association between our wintertime inversion pollution and premature birth. There's some preliminary work out on air pollution and suicide. And there's also work that links especially fine particulate pollution to childhood leukemia and also to lost IQ points in children and also lost cognitive function in older adults. So there are a lot of things that are very important for all of us to consider with air pollution and health.
You know, I grew up in an era of leaded gasoline. When I was a kid, there was no such thing as unleaded gasoline. It was leaded, and you could smell it in the air. I remember the first time I ever went to a city in Mexico, and I got out of the plane, and I went, I know that smell. That's gasoline. That's unleaded gas. And they say that was really. I maintain that I would be a genius today had I not grown up when there was leaded gasoline.
And you're not a genius now?
No, I'm pretty smart. But
obviously.
I'm pretty smart, but I would have been a genius had it. So the effects, you know, when we start saying things like air pollution could be the cause of autism, it can be linked to suicide, it could be linked to all of these things, and those are preliminary studies. I sort of then push back a little bit and say, now, are we going to make air pollution the demon that is the cause of all of our ills?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think where we need to shoot now is meeting our national ambient air quality standards, passing the policies we need to improve our air quality so that we are on all days that we meet ambient air quality standards. And then as research evolves, as we learn more, maybe we even learn that right now we measure PM 2.5. Maybe we should measure PM 1. So there are all kinds of things that researchers are studying to try to understand this so that the regulations can protect our health as best we can.
Tom, we're not leaving you out here. You're gonna be a really vital part in our next segment coming up here, because we're gonna talk about what people can do and what steps need to be taken to solve this problem. So, believe me, we'll get you into the.
That's fine. People hear a lot from me as it is. So these are the very, very smartest minds we have. So I'm glad we're talking to them.
You guys deal with this all the time, all of you. Are you all optimistic? Are we moving in the right direction?
So I'll take that. I am actually quite optimistic.
Real close, Tom.
I'm actually quite optimistic. There it is. I've never been told in my life that I'm being too quiet. I'm quite optimistic. One, we have really great minds, really smart people working on this. Additionally, the people in Utah are learning more, understanding that this is a problem, and coming up with good quality solutions. And what we try and do is empower people to take responsibility. And knowing, we talk about, in our organization, we talk a lot about the aggregation of marginal gains, which is the idea if everybody does one or two things a little bit different, they are a little bit better, we aggregate that together, that will have a significant effect on our airshed. And so it is just a few simple steps by everybody that will make a difference, on top of the big things that we're also talking about, right? So as we work to electrify our fleet, get more people in electric cars, Rocky Mountain Power is doing great work putting in strong infrastructure so that we can have more electric cars. We need
places where you can plug them in?
Yes, and really doing great work with that. Sarah's group here is working with the legislature to ensure that we're not penalizing people for doing good things. And then on top of that, as each individual citizen finds something that they can do, then we're going to make big steps. There are only so many things that we can legislate, that we can regulate. In order to, I believe, in order for us to get into attainment, it falls down at the feet of each individual citizen here in Utah.
Sarah, you work with the legislature all the time. Do you have some optimism that things are getting better?
I definitely have optimism, and now there's a bipartisan Clean Air Caucus that works on the Hill on legislation. I think part of it is a matter of our policymakers understanding that this is not doing without the things that we're advocating for, that it's really creating a better Utah going forward, and really understanding that the technologies, they're not future technologies, they're technologies that are here today, along with the individual actions. And building our buildings smarter and having requirements to building our buildings smarter is not doing without, it's doing more for Utah.
Well, we'll talk about that coming up, about what we can all do individually, but maybe there are more draconian things that could be done. And some people might advocate for that. I might be among them, but I'll try and remain as neutral as possible. But I'll ask you all some questions about how far we would maybe be willing to go to solve the problems of air pollution in the Salt Lake Valley. By the way, if any of you listening to this or watching it on live stream, if you have any questions, you can email your. Is that what the best way to do that? Email your various radio stations and Corey Corey at x96.com. If you have any questions, just send them along to Corey Corey at x96.com, and we can get them on live in the last segment of this show. The Air That We Breathe, sponsored by Broadway Media and Rocky Mountain Power. We'll take a break here, and we'll be right back.
What do you think is the main cause for our poor air quality?
Lack of good judgment by people in power, such as governor, legislatures, people like that.
Probably all the oil and copper refineries, and just the inversion that happens because we live in like a bowl, between the mountains, and when it gets cold, it just air quality turns to crap, man.
Well, obviously population and cars and I think the business and manufacturers and I feel like Salt Lake is getting much bigger and which creates manufacturers that are polluting the air and companies that are continuing to grow here and they're making air quality poor.
Probably just it seems like a complete lack of caring top to bottom. People don't want to push for better public transit, and everybody seems okay with driving because of convenience.
Probably automobiles and maybe the oil refineries. I'm not sure.
What do you think is the main cause for our poor air quality? What would be the biggest step Utah could make to improve our air quality?
Maybe more public transportation, so there aren't as many cars driving, because I feel like it's a lot of cars.
Probably expand public transit a lot more. I think a lot more people would use public transit if it was more widespread and more available.
Taking public transportation, combining trips, if you're going to go someplace, not idling. I got a neighbor, he idles his pickup trucks 24/7. I mean, it's ridiculous, you don't need to do that.
Try to promote taking the UTA, making it a little cheaper maybe, so more people can take it.
Utah, Salt Lake first is closing the refineries that are right there in North Salt Lake and possibly moving them somewhere else. But, drive less, drive better, fuel-efficient vehicles.
It's important for us to vote for people who talk about keeping clean air.
Making public transit free, man, it really is just, it costs too much for some people a month, and it's just, then all those people start driving and just ruins the air more,
Yours is the kind of world I'm dreaming.
Do you want clean air in Utah? Are you done with inversions, red days, lung issues? Our transportation is directly tied to the air we breathe. You, your family, and your neighbors deserve to breathe better as a result of the decision to live electric. Choose an electric vehicle. With over 700 chargers, the choice has never been easier. Rocky Mountain Power. Live electric. LiveElectric.org.
All right, we're back. I was just waiting for the sound to end. I knew I'd be okay. I was just having a little discussion with Dr. Kelly. Dr. Kelly. Yes. Carrie Kelly.
You just call me Carrie.
We're back here with our panel on the air that we breathe here. We have James Campbell from Rocky Mountain Power, Bryce Bird, Division of Air Quality for the state of Utah, Sarah Wright with the Utah
Clean
Air,
Energy.
Clean Energy Group, and Tom Carter, who is with UCARE, and Dr. Kelly, who is a professor at the University of Utah and studies these issues. So let's talk about what can be done to clean up the air in Utah. Maybe we should start with what's being done now legislatively. What is being done? What has the Utah legislature been? Yeah, Bryce, looks like you want to.
So I think the basis is the current regulatory program. And so I mentioned the Federal Clean Air Act. The state has adopted those provisions, has primacy to enforce those in Utah. So looking at technology, so make sure that as we look at new sources of emissions, we're looking at the best available control technology. So we do that for the large industrial sources. We require them to retrofit, put new controls on. For vehicles, of course, I think Tier 3 is something that people are familiar with. So it's a combination of new vehicles and cleaner fuel, which has the potential of reducing our vehicle emissions by 50% just in the next 10 years. As the older vehicles drop off the road, as the new ones are up to 90% cleaner than what is on the road today, that's a big provision for us. But we're not guaranteed of getting that. So under the federal program, refineries aren't obligated to produce that fuel here in Utah. They can average it amongst their fleet of refineries. They can buy credits. And so that's our big push right now, is to make sure we get the full benefit of those new vehicles in Utah. And there's also a choice that we make. So the Tier 3 vehicles are a fleet average. But here in Utah, we buy more pickup trucks. We buy more SUVs. It's part of our family, part of our lifestyle of enjoying the great outdoors. But because of that, we're not anticipating the full benefit of that. So we just need to look at everything that we do, determine, does it cause or add to our emissions, and is there a technology that will allow us to do that same thing, but do it with fewer emissions?
Can I ask you about the refineries and the refineries here do not have to produce, they are not obligated to produce it's what they call Tier 3 fuel, this cleaner fuel, right?
Correct.
So as you said, the federal government has said to the people who refine oil, you have to start producing this cleaner fuel. But if I understand what you said, they don't have to do it in all of their refineries. They just have to kind of start meeting the standards, and they can spread it out and do it how they want, right?
That's absolutely correct. They can average amongst
Can't
their
Governor Herbert go to those refinery guys and say, look, I know that you don't have to do this, but if you don't, the state of Utah will impose some fines or regulations, some fines.
So first of all, the governor has done that, but he hasn't had the stick. And that is that under the federal program, states are preempted from developing their own standards.
He doesn't have that stick to say, I will fine you.
Correct, but the legislature provided some economic incentives that allowed them to put the capital improvements in place and then recover some tax benefits over time, because that is the biggest thing that we can do to improve air quality is to clean up our fleet. But there's still, so we'll take Chevron Refinery for an example. So they've got refineries in California, they're already producing or overproducing, so they don't have to do it here, but they've announced that they're going to. And so later this spring, they're going to start the construction to do that. The Endeavor Refinery actually has just put a multi-$100 million emissions control project in place, and then the next step is to produce Tier 3 fuels. And so it is moving forward, but we're still working on a couple of refineries to make sure that they get it in place by at least 2020.
The state of Utah can't just march in there like, so we're going to surround your refinery with the National Guard and tell you to do it. One other quick thing about refineries, they are themselves a source of pollution, air pollution. And they are very close to the city. I know Mexico City, when they decided they were going to clean up their air, there was a big refinery right in the middle of the city, I guess, or it was close to the city. And the government said, you got to move. Right. Just move it.
Yeah, just a difference there is the government owned that refinery as well.
Oh, that's true. That's Pemex.
It wasn't quite America, correct.
Yeah, we will move the refinery.
But what we have done is, again, required retrofits of those. And so just since 1994, the refineries as a group have reduced their emissions by over 50%. With some projects that are underway right now. So the wet grass scrubber at the Endeavor Refinery just went online here a couple months ago. So just right here off the Capitol, you may see a new white plume coming off of that refinery. That's actually a steam plume from the control device. It doesn't linger on. It's going to reduce their emissions greatly over what it was before.
Sarah, let's talk about building regulations. You looked a little exasperated there. You mentioned Garbutt Homes, and they have made it their mission, and what a great niche for them to take in the market and say, no, we will build homes that are affordable and are zero emissions. So what needs to be done in terms of regulation to bring more of that pollution under control?
There's two things. We need to address the buildings that already exist, but with the new homes and buildings, right now, Utah's building homes, the requirement is about the 2009 code. And here we are in 2018, and we're only required to build buildings as efficiently as the 2009 code. So we could even just require to bring it up to the current code and have buildings required to build at that code, And then also, at the same time, I think it's critical because they have to learn to build in a new way, to offer them the tools and incentives and training so that those builders can come up to speed. Because, you know, homes, we're growing, we're going to build new homes, we want them as efficient as possible because there are fewer emissions. Do you want to chime in?
Well, and to that point too, the folks over at Garbett, they're building to 2032 standards, and that's looking significantly forward.
They're building to what?
2032 standards. So
they're building future homes.
Future homes.
Okay.
And with the idea being that you build a home and it's there for a very long time, right? I mean, you go up into the avenues, you go up into Sugar House. Those houses were built in the 50s.
I live in a house that's over 100 years old.
Right. So if you build at 2032 standards in 2018, then you're really building good homes that will last a long time. So I agree with Sarah, the idea of let's bring the codes up to now, but also encourage future building, because we want people to not have to retrofit in order to be a part of that. You know, one of the problems we have in general are water heaters, right? Well, you only buy a new water heater when your water heater goes out, and it's only after 10 or 12 years. So there are super low NOx water heaters, right? There's the regulation came into state where it's this summer, I think, that everybody has to get a new water heater, or you have to start building. When you get one, you have to get one.
I just had 2 water heaters put in last year,
right,
or a couple of years ago. Would those presumably are up to a better standard than my old ones?
But they're not going to be the best ones, and it won't be for another 10 years that you will buy, presumably, a ultra low NOx, right? And so those ones will stay online, and I'm making some assumptions. Those will stay online until it's time for you to buy a new one. So we're hopeful that starting this summer, when we're getting ultra-low NOx water heaters in, and James is going to correct a lot of the mistakes I'm making here, I'm hopeful, but we'll be able to see a good reduction in building emissions and homes emissions because we have these ultra-low NOx water heaters.
I see head shaking here a little bit.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to make a comment that I think as a community we need to think even bigger.
Yeah.
And not just have these small step improvements in the emissions and actually start going to emissions free.
Well, that's what I wanted to. We could be much harsher. We could be much more draconian on our building standards, couldn't we? But the builders, and they need to make money. They go, no, don't do that. You're going to kill me. I'm going to go out of business. You don't make these regulations. I mean, that's what happens, right?
That is what happens, and there are a lot of builders and developers in our legislature that don't yet understand that it's economic to build efficiently and future-proof your buildings.
I think it's key what Sarah just said. There are a lot of builders who are also members of the legislature. Just bear that in mind, all right? I don't think we need to say anything more about that, do we? Let's talk a little bit about things, carpooling, public transportation, more use of public transportation. Now, I've shot my mouth off on numerous occasions on my radio show and say we ought to just have all public transportation. We just have it be free. It should be free. I've changed my mind on that after reading some things just recently in preparation for this panel, in that if you make it free, people who drive their cars are probably still not going to use it, most of them, because it's more convenient to drive your car. So what needs to be done, and maybe what it is that we need to make it more expensive for people to drive their cars.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, we do have some good tests that show that. So the University of Utah provides free bus passes to all their students and employees. Right. The state of Utah does as well, but my parking lot is still full every day. And so even though it's free, that convenience piece just hasn't been overcome yet. So right now, about 1/3 of our commuting traffic uses public transportation. If we could double that, that'd be 6%, but again, we need to do more. So we need to understand better how we drive, make sure that we're avoiding buying the best car that we can. And you can do that. There's a smog rating now as part of the window sticker. Get one that's definitely above 5, but as high as possible. Make sure that you avoid idling. Make sure you avoid cold starts. And that is that as you're planning your trips, chain the trip so you're not letting it cool for 4 hours, start again. Bring a lunch to work, especially on those days when we have the inversions in place or the air pollution episodes in the summer. So there are choices that we can make that significantly reduce the emissions if we
or either forced to or have to drive that
Or we could just
vehicle.
put a huge tax on the number of miles you drive on I-15 every day. You get an allotment, and if you go over the allotment, you pay a big fee. And yes.
But actually what's interesting is a lot of what gets you is what's called a cold start. So every time you start that car up. So if you're really looking at just an emissions standpoint, driving down I-15 is, with your gasoline-fueled vehicle, is not a great thing. On the other hand, just driving less distance around town and continuing to let your car cool off and heat up is also bad. So you have to kind of balance all these things.
So what we talk about too, and Bryce can correct my science on this, but about 50% of your emissions take place within the first minute your car's on. So once you, and this is what Carrie's talking about, the cold start. So once you turn your car on, if you're driving your car to the bus stop, you haven't helped. So we need people to walk to the bus stop. We need people to walk to the track station. I know, I'm asking too much of you, I'm sorry. But really, and you talk about public transportation, there's this great piece of legislation. There are some bits of it that need to be tweaked that are working to modernize a little bit our public transportation system here. Because I agree, and Mayor Biskupski talked about this in her State of the City, where we need to make public transportation, maybe it's not an issue of free, and maybe it's it has to be an issue of convenience. Right now, we're maybe not running it the most convenient way. And you know, for me, I live close to a track stop. My office is close to a track stop, but it would take me 15 minutes to drive and an hour and a half to take the train. And so I have to figure out, well, I can work on the train because I won't text and drive anymore. I've been told by my fiance I'm not allowed. And the law, I follow the law. So you have to really figure out, and we need to work with our public officials, with the UTA, to figure out, is our public transportation convenient? Because I think that's what we're running into.
Right now, people use public transportation in the Salt Lake Valley out of a sense of doing the right thing. Many of them do, because it's the right thing to do, not that it's the most convenient thing to do. And I think we need to switch that so that people do it because it is the most convenient thing to do. Yes, James.
Yeah, I was just going to say about with the cold starts and even with, as we move to Tier 3 fuels, there's still emissions from these traditional vehicles, and the way we get away from all of that is transitioning over to electric vehicles, which really is the direction the planet is going, not just the US. Actually, if you look at in China is mandating electric vehicles that very aggressive. They're moving into that direction. You have communities in Europe and London, they're going to ban Paris, they're going to ban all internal combustion engines in the city center. So electric vehicles really is that answer to get rid of these emissions. When Envision Utah did their study of as our population is going to double, assuming Tier 3 fuels, we still had to have 35% of all of our vehicles be emissions-free or electric to be able to comply with standards. So it's something that we have to move into. And what most people don't realize is there's some economic savings. There's a little bit of a premium at the upfront cost, but the actual operation of the electric vehicle, you don't have to do maintenance.
Yeah, and I was just when you talk about those other cities around the world, and Mexico City did it as well. That was once the most polluted city on the planet, apparently. They cleaned it up, then people started to backslide, and now they're having to crack down and try some different things. But what you're talking about is governments being draconian, really cracking down on people, and so far, local governments and the federal government here in this country have not been willing to do that. Is that because they're afraid of the pushback from the voters? Are they afraid of losing money from the people who lobby them? What is, what would happen if we did it? If we just cracked down?
You know, it depends on which policies that we want to move forward. I think if they were economically sound, we would just have benefits going forward. And I think the people would be happy if we had better homes, better buildings, cleaner cars. It's a matter of bringing industry along with us and helping them understand that in the long run, it's good for them. You know, economic development folks around the state have shown that sometimes it's hard to recruit people to Utah when you bring them in on a bad air
It's an economic issue.
It's a huge economic issue. And so we just have to look at the full picture and not just at individual interest of one specific industry, but then at the same time ensure that that industry can continue to thrive as we move into a new paradigm.
I do think in Utah, though, there still is an attitude of we don't want the government to tell us what to do. And that's why I think it's important as us, as members of the community, we educate our fellow members that say, hey, you can make changes that will make a difference. Like as I was talking about with like an electric vehicle, that I don't think most people realize that the cost of the fuel, the electricity in that is equivalent to under $1 a gallon if you look at a comparable cost. So it actually can be an economic savings, and in the long run, there really is these benefits. And I think a lot of that people just aren't aware. And so before we go down the draconian, which there may be a kind of a backlash to that of this population, that we look at what are some education, are there incentives we can do to really try to get people to shift to the behavior that is beneficial?
We got some questions from viewers, listeners, but let's quickly get your comments.
So, and I just agree with James on this point. I think education is very important here. I think a lot of times we talk about electric vehicles, people think of Teslas. They don't think about Leafs and Volts and understand that.
I just bought an electric bicycle.
Even better. Then I need that because I'm very indoorsy. But so the idea that, oh, I can't drive electric, it's a Tesla, I don't have $90,000 for a car. Well, these new cars that are coming out are very affordable for people to drive, on top of the fact that there is no maintenance. And so we need to help people understand that this is a viable economic solution for them on every single level related to that. And it will help solve our problem when we get to more inclusion, because right now, as Sarah said, it's about 0.5, 0.6% of people driving those kinds of cars.
Dr. Carrie Kelly.
And I just wanted to say that we need sort of both. We've been talking about solutions that you can do right now, sort of trip chaining and so forth, and then you also need solutions that are going to take us into the future as our population doubles, better, smarter buildings, zero-emitting vehicles. So we need to work on these together.
Let's get to a couple of questions here. Oh, just one other thing, though. James Campbell, you are an industry representative, actually. Rocky Mountain Power is an industry. Rocky Mountain Power, as I looked over some materials from your company and from you, we talk about companies, various industries, making them see that this is to their advantage, to look to the future. It appears to me that Rocky Mountain Power has looked to the future and made some decisions about where the company will be in 50 years and more from now, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have to credit our management for really having a vision, but the company is committed to transitioning to more of a cleaner energy future. I mean, that is definitely how we see it. It's also an economic decision. You know, one of the things is if you look at when you go and invest in power plants, you want to spend billions of dollars and not knowing what the cost of those are. Where now with some renewables and some of the cleaner energies, you don't have to worry about fuel costs and stuff like that. So there's been a decision to really plan and prepare, knowing that we're going to be a decarbonized future. That is the
whatever they say. Coal will go away one day.
It's definitely moving in that direction, but we do need to be cognizant of the communities, and I know we have employees. We have communities out there.
I know that, and the Navajo tribes down there. They depend on the coal industry. It's so hard because it's also interconnected. But let me just get to a couple of quick questions here. Brian Ty, I think it is. I spend a lot of time idling in traffic with no traffic passing on the cross street. This occurs with me every morning because I drive to work at like 5:30 in the morning, and I'm stopping at traffic lights and just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. That's what can anything be done about traffic light? Sync them up, do something. Yeah, right.
So they're trying. So there's part of UDOT's budget and Salt Lake City's budget that is focused on the signal coordination and smart signaling too. So at the traffic operations center that UDOT operates, they can actually change the timing on signals during parts of the day remotely. And so, again, working on that, not there yet. It's a complex
Okay,
issue.
so Brian, the answer is we're working on it.
Yeah.
All right. From Noel Stewart, can adding more vegetation make a difference in air quality, especially around roads and factories? You know, I just saw a story in the news today or yesterday in China where they have horrible pollution problems. They've mobilized 60,000 members of the army to plant trees. That's their job now, to go around China planting trees. So vegetation can make a difference. Yeah, Dr. Kelly. Kelly.
Yes, it does. It makes a difference, especially in those nearby areas. So if you've got a school or homes that are near a roadway or a source of ground level pollution, you can put vegetation barriers, and that does reduce pollution levels.
Can we have big shrubs grown around the refineries, maybe? Would it help? I guess it might.
Well, it does. It works as a sort of a physical barrier for particulate matter. So, so these things work kind of at a small scale. I don't think it's the answer to improve our pollution. However, it is a way to reduce exposure of children and people who live in an area that's near a source of pollution.
Tom, let me give you this one. Nathan wants to know: would it help during the inversions to close drive-through services like banks, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, all that?
Yeah, absolutely it would. Although we don't advocate for shutting down business, but we do think idling is a big problem, right? So if I ate at McDonald's this morning because I love it, and so if they're listening and they want to sponsor me, great, I'll take their money.
That's Tom at UCare.
Yes, right. But these little moments of idling are a big deal, and especially around schools. When people drop off their kids or pick up their kids, and they're sitting there, and that pollution just keeps coming and coming and coming. And we talk to people about this. They say, well, I need to, what if I get cold or in the summertime, but I need to keep my air conditioning on? My response to that is wear a sweater or roll down your windows. We really need people to shut their cars off as much as possible. And so the idea of saying, well, turn your car off and go in and get your Big Mac, or you drive by any Starbucks or those soda shops and you see 15 cars back. If they've just turned off their cars, turn them back on quickly to move forward, that's really a small-scale solution, but aggregated together, that makes a big difference.
The only drive-through service I regularly use is a dry cleaner, and I pull up to the window and I turn off my car, and I think they always look at me like, what is he doing? I turn it off and wait till I get my dry cleaning and put it in the car, and then I start it back up.
Wyoming, do you go through the drive-through liquor stores? And
no comment. This question from Brandon in Provo. I've seen a bunch of windmills in Spanish Fork. Oh, the wind farm there at the mouth of Spanish Fork Canyon. It says, does that really work? And are there more coming? Is that a Utah?
So that's kind of an older facility. It's pretty small. Actually, in Wyoming, and if anybody's ever been to Wyoming, know that it blows a lot of wind. And so we've built about 2,000 megawatts, which probably doesn't mean a whole lot. But if you drive through it, it is amazing to look at these huge towers with the wind turbines as far as the eye can see.
I've seen those in Washington as well.
Yeah, and there's going to be more coming. The challenge is you don't really see it here in Utah, but there are and they serve Salt Lake City. I mean, they basically we pipe it back in here to Utah to serve your
Rocky Mountain Power has those in Wyoming as well. You serve
correct.
Wyoming.
Yeah, huge wind farms.
Could I stick up
yes.
for the wind farm at Spanish
Yes.
Fork? It's a great resource. It's diurnal, so if you drive in the morning, you'll see them generating power, and in the evening. But if you drive in the middle of the day, they might not be going, but they generate a lot of power.
I lived at the mouth of Ogden Canyon for a number of years, so I know what you mean when you say diurnal. That means that the canyon blows out of the wind blows out of the canyon in the morning and in the evening, and then it stops at other times. Boy, it was windy. Let's see. We got time for one more question, Corey. I saw giant pollution vacuums in China. Do these work? Does anybody know what pollution? Yeah, right.
So it's one of those emerging technologies. So yes, there have been some companies that have looked at this. We actually use giant pollution vacuums at our coal-fired power plants, at refineries, and so the technology is there. It does work. Whether it works on the local scale, I think that's one of those emerging things that we ought to look at.
It's interesting. Sometimes I think we should just put big, gigantic fans and then blow the pollution to Nevada.
Can I say something?
Yes.
That's what the students in chemical engineering and air pollution class, that's one of the first problems they solve. It would, to blow the pollution to Park City, would take more energy than the state generates.
All right. Thank you all for being with us for The Air That We Breathe. James Campbell, Rocky Mountain Power, Bryce Bird, the Division of Air Quality, State of Utah, Sarah Wright, Utah Clean Energy, Tom Carter, UCARE, and Dr. Carrie Kelly from the University of Utah. I'm Bill Allred. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.